Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. We continue with our previews this week with a writer who has covered Michigan with M Live, the Detroit Free Press, and now The Athletic. Nick Baumgardner joins me today as we continue to preview our Wolverines. First, a few of my thoughts before Nick joins us. Practice started on Friday for Jim Harbaugh and his team, and as fans and reporters, we know we don't get much news of importance at this time of the year, and that's okay with me. Sure, we will have pressers each week in August with staff and players, but it's always the same. We're working hard, trying to get better every day, etc., etc. And I'm fine with that too, I'm sure you are. What the team does behind their closed practice facility is nothing we need to know about. The only thing we as fans are interested in is what happens on Saturdays starting in September. So whether you are young, middle-aged, or even an old-timer, you know this. The preseason hype is fun, and that's all it is. It means very little. My guest today has covered Michigan now for over a decade. He says this year he has no idea what to expect, and it is a big year for the program, especially our head coach. Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic joins us next on this week's edition of The Michigan Man, so stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment as we continue our previews for the fast approaching season is Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic. Once again, Nick, great to have you back talking football.
Always good to be with you, Mike. It means that football's here and we're actually going to play it this time. Excited. Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to play and knock on wood, keep your fingers crossed with this Delta variant that we're going to be able to pack them into the big house. And that's going to be interesting the first couple of weeks to see too, Nick. Are we going to have pockets of no-shows? How is this COVID the year and a half off? How is that going to impact a lot of the fans, especially a lot of the older fans?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been something I've been really fascinated by because, we've thought about, or we've seen, I should say, the numbers reported by Michigan in terms of sales and stuff. And I think the ticket sales numbers have been right in line with where they were pre-COVID, or I think even maybe a tick up. So that was good news for Michigan, but I've been really interested to see, Mike, what it's going to look like that first week. I mean, what the tailgate lot's going to look like. People bought their tickets, but are you going to have like walk-ups? Are you going to have some single games? Because, as you know, Mike, I mean, they sell, combined with students and general population, somewhere like 85 to 88,000, I want to say something like that. I'm probably off by a couple, but that makeup of what gets you to 110 is, single game tickets. So that's really what I'm interested in, I guess, is, how many folks, plan to do it, or, maybe those plans get changed, or, what's it all going to look like? But hey, I mean, there's going to be some people in there. So, I mean, some people are going to be in there. Speaking to someone who was in press boxes last year at buildings that were empty, I don't want to see that again. So if it's even half full, it'll be cool to see fans back in the building. I was actually at Ford Field, Mike, for Lions scrimmage on Saturday, and there was about 10,000 fans that were there, and that was pretty cool, right? Yeah. So it's kind of cool. It's been cool to see that coming back. So hopefully, knock on wood here, we'll be able to see everybody, and it'll be fun again.
I hope so. I think there's a large segment that's amped up to get back to normal, and Saturday afternoons in Ann Arbor is a part of that. So we'll see. It won't be long. Good day yesterday or Sunday, I should say, Nick, for Michigan football. Two former greats inducted into the Hall of Fame, Charles Woodson and Steve Hutchinson, and man, both great players, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, Woodson! I saw his jacket. When they put the jacket on him, and all I could think of was like, did somebody make that jacket in like 2000 and just put it on a hanger? I mean, like, all I can think of. I mean, those are guys. Charles Woodson and Steve Hutchinson are guys that were, for me, this is the age of player. You saw the rest of those guys in the class too. Peyton, Manning, all these guys. Like, for me, these are the age of player that I kind of grew up with. Mm-hmm. So. I was a kid in high school when, or just starting high school, I think, when Charles Woodson made the big interception on the sideline against Michigan State, and had the Heisman season and did all the, and then you saw him go in the NFL and be as flawless as he was for so long. But he overshadows Steve Hutchinson, who was one of the best interior offensive linemen of a generation. I mean, he was a generational offensive lineman all the way, who came to Michigan, Mike, as you know, as a defensive lineman, who had to switch positions early in his career, and then, just seamless. I mean, what a class of people at Michigan, but also in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it was just crazy. 2 on one team. Somebody asked me, has that happened before? I have no idea, but that's that's pretty wild. And then you've also got Tom Brady on that team, who's still playing in the NFL. So, yes, I'd say that's a pretty exciting day for Michigan. I know that I even saw that Ward Manuel got to shout out all these guys in a Regents meeting a couple weeks ago. I thought that had to have been pretty cool. He got to shout out Tom Brady, congratulate him on another Super Bowl, and then congratulations to Charles Woodson and Steve Hutchinson for going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So pretty cool for everyone, I'm sure, but definitely two guys that all the way have earned it, I would say. That's 2 Hall of Famers all the way in my book.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this year's edition of Michigan Football, Nick, started practice on Friday, so we are in for our 4 weeks of speculation about whether this will be a rebuilding year, a bounce-back year. I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen, but there are so many questions surrounding this team, aren't there, Nick?
Oh, yeah. I mean, including the coach. I mean, and that's really kind of the situation, I guess, where it's like, no one really knows what this is going to be at the end of the year. No one knows what this is going to be during the year. No one really knows how it's going to look, maybe more than ever, because if you really part it down even further, you've got a brand new defense. You've got major changes in your offensive staff, though I don't think we'll see major changes in how they run offense. It'll certainly, I think, be different in general. I mean, maybe it won't be so different to the average eye, but there'll be change there. Just a ton of change across the board, and a ton of change, Mike, at like the 11th hour. So it's really strange in some ways, but it's also necessary. There was so much change that was necessary coming out of the 2020 season. And, I got to a point, and I probably had told you on your show if we talked at the end of the year. I can't remember if we did, but I had lost the ability to argue with anyone who thought Jim Harbaugh should have been fired last year. Like, if you thought he should have been fired based on his resume and everything else, there was enough there that I thought your point had merit to it. But Michigan obviously didn't, and it's their decision to make. It's Ward Manuel's decision to make. They opted to go with, the change around him and keeping him here with, hopes that, hey, we're going to try to get this right, but also this isn't good enough, and you need to know that this isn't good enough. So there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot to unpack. It all happened at once, and people sort of say, well, what does this mean about now? And so you look at it now and you say, well, the challenge that was put in front of Jim Harbaugh this year was fix this by any means necessary, which includes fixing yourself first. So you need to be a better leader. You need to be a better listener. You need to be a better communicator. And you need to be better in general as the leader of the football program. And I think if you go across the board and look at all the moves he made this offseason, I think he did that. I think he made a lot of decisions that were beneficial to the program. The change in the recruiting department, I think, was good. Bringing in someone like Steve Klinkscale, I think, was really good and long overdue. Bringing in people like Mike Hart was long overdue. Ron Bellamy was a good decision, I think. I mean, so good decisions were made here. Smart ideas happened here, moving on from, the defensive situation with Don Brown the way it was. I mean, we've talked about him 1,000 times. I wouldn't blame everything on Don Brown, but it was certainly time for a change. All these things were done, and they were all necessary, but it's like we've done this before with Harbaugh, and we've seen this with him, where it's like you've made changes. Is that enough? Is it going to be enough at the right time? Is it going to be enough to click, or is it all going to be something that at the end of the day is just window dressing on the same exact thing that we saw? And so, yeah, it's a fascinating year. Maybe the most fascinating I've probably covered, Mike, in the 10 or 11 years I've been doing this, because I really don't know how it's all going to go. And more importantly, I guess we're all sort of sitting here wondering, if it goes badly, are they going to make a change this time or not? So I think that's a question that still lingers as well. And it's all things that are kind of just sitting there on the surface. But hey, this is Jim Harbaugh, Mike. We know this. This is Captain Chaos. I mean, if anybody navigates these waters better than Jim Harbaugh, I've yet to see that guy. So he's got one in front of him here, but he's done it before. So it's interesting. I got to say, I'm really fascinated to see how this season's going to go because I really don't know.
Wholesale change, it was necessary, but one of the concerns I have about that is when you look around the college football landscape, we've seen this happen at other schools aside from Michigan. But you wonder when you bring in that many new faces with their philosophies, their personalities, usually at any program, it takes time for this to mesh. And I think that's one of the things, if you ask the fan base that question, are you expecting it will take time or will you give it time? They're going to say, no, it's year 7. Hard to believe we're going to see really immediate results this year, at least for me, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because what we need to see that can be immediate, though, is a more cohesive football team that plays together and plays up to its talent level and fights a lot longer than the team that we saw last year on the field. That was a jarring, situation when they walked off the field against Wisconsin, and Harbaugh looked at everyone in the media presser there on the Zoom and basically was like, we need to find people who want to fight for the team. Like, that summed it up. I mean, that was as bad as I've seen effort-wise, from a Michigan team. So they need to fix that, number one. And if you do that, I think that fixes a lot of the issues. Doesn't fix everything. It doesn't even come close to everything that you have, but it gets you at least in the ballpark of having a chance, because that was the takeaway I had last year. It was like the team didn't want to fight anymore. They were done. They packed it in. I've seen that before. I mean, I've seen teams do that before. It's never good. It usually ends in the coach getting fired and change happening. And that's not what happened here. But they also made changes to try to recenter themselves and then hope that, the guys will get back on the same page again. And all reports have been that that's what it is. So, I mean, the defense is not going to look great early, I wouldn't think. It might not look great at all this year. And it might be something where the offense has to play above its head. But at the same time, Mike, there's a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. The quarterback situation is interesting, right? But they have a lot of guys on that side that can make plays for you if you just put the right people in the right spots, and maybe they surprise you. So a lot of it to me starts with, are you going to get back to being a team that plays for each other? Because that had gone away, and that needs to be the big focal point here in camp, and it needs to be the big focal point the whole season, because you're not going anywhere until you get that back. All reports were that was the case, but as is the case with everything, we have to sort of see it on the field to believe it.
No, you're right about that. And from what we're hearing, Cade McNamara earning high praise for his leadership and abilities from both the staff and his fellow teammates, which is always good. But we've heard these things before come out of preseason camp. It's pretty much, it seems, his job to lose right now, Nick, isn't it?
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah, sounds like. I mean, it's interesting. Let me ask you this, Mike. I asked me this the other day. When they were at media days last week, and Harbaugh got asked, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, in Indy, and Harbaugh got asked the question that he gets asked every year about, your quarterback. Who's the quarterback going to be? Because it's never settled. Everything. And every year he answers it, and it's, well, we've got 3 of them, or 2 of them, or 4 of them, or whatever, and he talks about how it's wide open and it's a cage match. This time he didn't. He said, it's Cade McNamara. That's the guy right now until somebody unseats him. I thought that was different. I don't know if that means that Cade McNamara is that far in front of everyone, or they're trying to instill confidence in him, but it does seem like, to your point, that he was clearly the guy that was the best in spring, and the guy that the team was, rallying around as the best in spring, and they weren't going to hide from that. And so I thought that was different. I thought that was different and new, and just kind of, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that was something that was different. I noted, and I thought it was probably going to be positive for Cade McNamara's psyche heading into camp, and we'll see how, he got to back that up. But yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because he's in a really tough spot because he's only played less than 2 games. He looks good in less than 2 games. He had a good spring. He looks like he's a good player, but there's still a lot to prove there, and you're still walking that fine line of confidence. And so, you want to make sure you got your bases covered. You bring Alan Bowman in. You want to make sure that McCarthy gets a chance. But also, ideally here, you probably want the guy that's got experience in this offense to be the guy that does it. So sounds like they're in a good spot there, at least to start. But again, that's the big mystery. It's, what he played a backup game against Rutgers and then one quarter against Penn State, and that was it. So, I mean, we don't have a lot to go on here in terms of, what we can expect from him realistically. So a lot of it's still going to be TBD no matter what happens here in any of those situations. But yeah, it does seem like McNamara is the guy for now. But, Jim, I mean, that could change if he has a poor camp. I mean, that could certainly change pretty quickly.
Getting back to your question, it really surprised me, especially given the Harbaugh era. I mean, he has danced around that question every year, even when Shea Patterson was here, and you kind of knew it was obvious who was going to get the start. Jim just didn't answer those questions. But, yeah, that's why I was surprised in the spring to come out of spring ball. Cade McNamara is number one. And then, at the Big Ten Media Days, yes, Cade McNamara is number one. And I really hope that's true for the team, because if you're going to go out there and say that, and I know a lot of fans are saying, well, what's the deal with JJ? I mean, is he not that good then? But I think behind the scenes, you're right. His sample of work for us as fans and reporters is very small. Right. So the staff must know something behind the scenes, especially about his psyche. So, yeah, very surprising. But now I'm wondering, how long does Cade get? That's going to be the interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because it's, it's a similar situation to, although I will say it's a little different, and I'll say why, but it's similar to the Milton situation last year where, and it's not the same because obviously COVID was COVID, but and the situation was much different there. But, when they basically just came out and said, he's the guy. He's starting. And we're like, based on what? And they're like, well, based on we said so. So it's just like, okay, so he's starting. This isn't that, of course. Cade McNamara's played in more games he's played more meaningful snaps, I should say, than Milton has. But there is still some of that, we really like him and we really like what he did, but we're also trying to, we want him to have his confidence at a level that it needs to be at, and it needs to be able to maintain itself. And that comes into the question of how long is he going to have? Because I think what we saw with Milton last year was, a guy who they did a terrific job of getting ready to play that first game in that hectic, run up to that first game. And he killed it, right? He was awesome. I mean, he was outstanding. He did everything that they asked him to do, and it looked terrific. And then everything after that was, we'll see. And it didn't look, everything fell off a cliff. And then he got dinged up, and it just did not stick together. And obviously Joe's confidence just was gone. I mean, it just vanished. So for me, with a young quarterback like this, it's going to be how long he gets is going to be really about how long he maintains whatever confidence he has when he starts the season. His start is going to have to be really, really important, I would think, because, for these young guys coming in for the first time, it works both ways. If you start, rocky, sometimes you end up playing worse than you really are. And sometimes if you start, we've seen this, Mike, if you start hot, sometimes you end up playing better than you are for a little while. So, you can play above your head, too, in those situations. So I think his start is going to be super important. And where his confidence is at the end of September, will kind of tell us all we need to know. But, how quickly does Alan Bowman get himself up to speed? That's a big part of it, too. And then all things I was told at the end of spring were that J.J. McCarthy is going to need a year to get his strength up and get himself, sort of physically ready to play at this level, which is the same type of question we'd have for Cade, which would be, are you going to be able to take the hits? Are you going to be able to get through the season? Because they're going to ask you to run a little bit. So that's where I saw it. But, we still got about 3.5 weeks here, whatever it is, before they go play. So, a lot can change between now and then for sure.
Absolutely can. Well, let's talk about some of the talent surrounding, Cade. Start with that running back room, Nick. Mike Hart is the new position coach. We all know who Mike is. At IU, Mike seemed to like a bell cow back, which we have not seen at Michigan in a long time. But between Haskins, Corum, and Donovan Edwards, he certainly has, at least on paper, plenty of talent to work with, doesn't he?
He does. And I think that what you saw there at Indiana was, they had a guy in Stevie Scott that was just better than everyone else in the room. And what you saw, though, was that Mike Hart's not afraid to say, well, okay, then you're the guy. And we're just going to go with you. And everybody else is going to have to knock you off until, you know what I mean? So that, it takes something to be that, too, to have the, and if you remember back, Stevie Scott was taking heavy workloads as a pretty young player. He wasn't afraid to put him in there as a young guy either. So I think that it says that if you can prove that you're capable of being a bell cow, then he'll let you do it. But that's not to say that somebody in here is just going to take the ball and run a bunch of times. Now, I'm interested to see what the whole thing, how it all plays out, because I think it's super unique in that you have Hassan Haskins, who I think is probably the most underrated player on the team in terms of somebody that no one ever talks about, who's just like a really good, steady football player who does a lot of really good stuff. But also, the playmakers they have back there in Corum and Donovan Edwards, and you can even, to a degree, include someone like A.J. Henning, who you can move around a lot. Those guys all need to play, and they need touches. And so, they need to get involved as well. And Hassan is not going to be the type of guy that would complain about a touch or whatever. It'd be the opposite of that, frankly. And that's probably why he's underrated, because nobody talks about him, because he's a pretty quiet guy. But at the same time, it's like he also needs to be the player that you probably have in the critical situations, the guy that you're trusting, until one of those younger guys comes in and proves otherwise. And I think that'll be probably how this plays out early, that it'll be Haskins' room until one of those younger guys can come in there and say, well, it's mine now. Because the difference there is that a Donovan Edwards or a Blake Corum has, that juice and that speed and that quickness to change a game in one play. Whereas, Haskins is a good football player, and we've seen him break runs, but I wouldn't call him the type of home run, maybe threat that those other two guys would be. He's more of a complete back, though, and it's up to the other two guys to sort of catch him in that area, because, you've got to be trusted to do all things back there, which is super important in this offense for sure.
Well, Josh Gaddis mentioned over the weekend that he thinks Michigan will be able to run the ball better this year. And, we hear stuff like that all the time in preseason, but it sounds like he has a lot of confidence in that offensive line. He thinks it's going to be pretty good, doesn't he?
Yeah, they were excited about it at the end of spring. They were excited about it coming into the summer. And you've heard them talk about all the guys that they have back now that have started, which is important, but it's also, it's an interesting time. They have reason to be excited, I think, because you do have a lot of guys like a Zach Zinter who got, that really valuable experience early in his career and is a super talented player. So now, they think he's ready to really stretch it out and see what happens here. So you've got some guys like that. Ryan Hayes, you get a clean bill of health on him and let him go. And they really, have been excited about him for a while. So see what he can do. I mean, there's a lot of guys they've been excited about for a minute that are going to get a chance to really go now. But it's also one of those, for me, where I look at it and say, but the offensive line really needs to be the best group on the team here from my vantage point for Michigan. The quarterback situation, no matter what you sort it out as, is unproven as we sit today. The defense is probably going to be shaky, I would say at best. You've got to be able to run the ball. You've got to be able to sustain drives, and you've got to be able to keep your defense off the field at all costs. I mean, that's what Michigan's entire, game plan and everything else really needs to be here as Mike McDonald's outfit sort of gets it going. So the offensive line has to be really good. It just does. It can't be average or a little bit good or pretty good. It has to be, in my mind, it has to be very good. It has to be, something similar to what we saw in 2019, an offensive line that year that, maybe not one that had 4 NFL draft picks on it, but one that, could take over a game against most teams when they needed to, and make sure that anything choppy was going to get evened out because, they were going to kind of calm the waters. And that's really what you want from this group here. And that's what they didn't have last year. And that's what they need to get back. So I think it's super important. The whole, kind of trajectory of the season, and as far as I sit, sort of hinges on how that offensive line plays. I mean, if they're struggling early, this is going to get rough. I can't see this thing taking off, right? So super important, and it's probably going to start in the middle. Is Andrew Vistardis going to have enough to do it? I know they like him a lot. He's a smart kid. They all love him. The guys like him, but at the same time, he's had injury issues. Can he do it? He's a former walk-on. Is he capable of doing it? And if he's not, then they need to make a decision there, which would probably be Zach Zinter, who's never started inside before, which is another roll of the dice, right? So interesting, but also that first game, we're going to learn a lot. That's the thing, Mike. That's why this season is going to be really interesting. We're going to learn so much about Michigan and where they're at, where they're headed, everything else, probably after week 1 and week 2, really, because they have a low-key interesting one early and then another and a really big one there right after it.
No, and I agree with you 100% about the offensive line being the most important unit on this team. We want to see a return to a solid physical running game. Hey, and an offensive line that can do that can cover a multitude of sins, especially a young quarterback developing, and really help him. The other thing I think most of us like to see, I should say, is an effective passing game. And to that end, the receiver room has plenty of talent. I think Ronnie Bell sticks out to me as a guy who you can count on. The other guys, I guess potential is the word I would use for them.
Right.
We hear about the speed. We hear a lot of good things about them, but we haven't seen it develop for a lot of reasons. That needs to change this year too, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that this is really where Josh Gaddis has to take the next step as a coordinator and a coach, I would say, because Josh is a smart football coach. Anyone who's talked with him for an extended period of time will tell you that. I mean, he thinks about the game in a really smart way. He's always thinking about it. His ideas make a lot of sense. But to your point, Mike, we see a lot of talented players at Michigan oftentimes look like they're playing like 85% speed of what they can really play. Because what happens is, I think, they are not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. They're not quite sure where they're supposed to be going. They're not quite sure what the coach wants on this. They're not quite sure. You know what I mean? It's a little bit not quite sure, right? We've seen that for the first 2 years of Josh Gaddis. We've seen too much of that. You know, at the end of 2019, that started to go away, and the offense started to play with a little more pace, and we saw that pick up. But there's that lag, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. Everybody that's listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's that lag when the ball snaps, and everybody looks like they're kind of like barely getting out of their stance. That's coaching, and that is being organized and having the ability to sort of really hammer in to your guys what you want them to do and where you want them to go, so they're not thinking. They're just reacting and going. They need to get back to that, and I think that, you know, Josh talked about that earlier this week, or last week, I guess it was now, that he was really excited about the staff being on a better page or a better place with its trust and communication. And he thought he was in a better place with his sort of ability to collect everyone's ideas, you know, throw out what's not going to work, make sure we keep what is going to work, and don't sort of overcomplicate this stuff and keep it sort of in the strike zone. When he was saying those things, that's all I could think about was that little lag time and all the stuff that sort of creates all these little issues that we see pile up. And if they can sort of get rid of that, you know, then I think they have a chance to really surprise people. But that's really what it's going to be about. This is a huge year for Josh Gaddis, apart from Michigan in general. I mean, it's a big year for Michigan in general, but for Josh Gaddis' coaching career, right? I mean, he got a big opportunity to come here as a young offensive coordinator. This is a big, big spot for him. So big year for him. I think he knows it. He seems excited. And again, yeah, I'm excited to see sort of how it looks, because we're going to know pretty quickly, I think, where it's at and where it's not. And yeah, we know what to look for sure.
I think the offense is going to be just fine. You're right. Josh Gaddis, smart, young guy, but it is his third year. I think now he has a lot of the pieces that he needs. We just have to, get the offensive line going and see how Cade McNamara develops. But I have some confidence that's going to work out. The other side of the ball, now that worries me. It worries a lot of fans. Mike McDonald, first-year coordinator, and he's putting in a new defense. But I thought it was funny the other day. He said defense isn't rocket science, and what he's installed doesn't have a learning curve that people think that should. To me, it's more of a personnel issue, though, as opposed to schematics.
Right.
Especially on that D-line. That has to be the greatest area of concern for this defense, isn't it, Nick?
Yes. I mean, that's the entire, like, you just nailed it, Mike. I mean, it's he can tailor the scheme down, or, water it down, or, simplify a lot of stuff about what they were doing in Baltimore, or what they did at Georgia, or what they did somewhere else. I mean, talk about that too. It's a bunch of different things they want to mix together, but it all comes back to, it's personnel. I mean, do you have enough in the middle of your defense up front to reasonably ask anyone do anything against, Wisconsin or an Ohio State or Penn State or anybody really on the ground? I mean, do you have anybody that can anchor the middle, and do you have anybody that can stand outside and play man coverage? And if the answer to that is similar to what it was last year, which it probably is, then you need to be a zone team, and you need to be somebody who's doing things that are much different than what we've seen Michigan do in previous years. So really it's more about how quickly can you teach them to master something opposite, right? They were learning for the previous 4 years or whatever it was under Don Brown to be, mastering of man coverage. Now you need to be sort of the flip side of that. So I think it's a lot of, how quickly, it's not how quickly can you get your scheme installed, it's how quickly can you get sort of, a bunch of guys that were learning how to play one way to learn how to play another way and really kind of master that. Because if you can do that, then I think that he's right in saying that they can do a lot of stuff, and it really doesn't have to be as complicated as people think. I mean, they can make it as basic as they want. If you can get guys that really know what they're doing with, look, we're going to be in cover 3 match, and we're going to hand these routes off, and we're going to be, good in our zones, and we're going to get to our spots and all this stuff, and everybody does that, then you're probably going to have a pretty good defense. But, like, if 9 guys do that and 2 guys don't know how to do it, like, you're not. So, like, that's kind of where it's at here. That's where it was last year, and it's still the same thing. It's, can you get, a roster that we've seen the talent level drop over the years? It's still at a lower level. It needs to be replenished. But can you get those guys to sort of get the best out of themselves and also sort of perfect a couple of coverages or a couple of techniques that'll kind of help them and go forward and see if you can figure it out that way? Because that's probably their best bet. That's probably their safest way to get it, because I just don't see a lot of answers that weren't already there. I mean, some guys are going to have to really surprise, I would say, right? I mean, that's Donovan Jeter's, it hasn't been, he's not a freshman, right? So, I mean, we've seen some of these. Mozzie Smith's not a freshman either. So some guys would have to really either turn a corner big time, and in some cases they'd have to surprise. So, fascinating. I really don't know how this is going to go defensively, Mike, because all brand new. But hey, if he can get all 11 to play hard, okay, then that's a start, because that's another thing that I think they'd sort of lost as the year went on last year, and that'd be your start. So find a couple things you do well and go from there. That seems to be his MO and seems to be where he's going with it now anyway. So I guess we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I guess we could say the same thing about the linebacking core too. I mean, I look at the 2 deep and just, think, I don't know. I just don't know. As you said about the defensive line, I think some guys are going to have to step it up or surprise, because at least when you look on paper at that 2 deep, it's not a scary group of linebackers, is it?
No, and it's an unproven one at best that has had questions in the past about, Josh Ross is obviously stronger now and all these things, and I saw that, but it's like that's not Josh's problem. Josh's problem really wasn't the strength. It was, can you get side to side? How's your leg? Are you healthy? All these things. So we'll see, but I would expect Josh, if he's healthy, will have a solid year. He's a solid player. He's a smart kid. Mike Barrett is another one, Mike. Like, they've got a lot of guys like that, like Mike Barrett, that are just kind of like, they really haven't. They were just getting to that like point last year where it was time to trust them and see what they could do, and the season was a disaster. So it's like, it's hard for me to look back at last year defensively with a lot of those guys and say, okay, well, were you just not ready, or can you not do this? Because in some cases, maybe that's what it is. Maybe they were being put in positions where they just simply can't hold up. And maybe in some cases they were being put in a position where they were not ready yet. Because I still think a guy like Mike Barrett has a ton of talent and a ton of ability. Like, if you can get him to sort of focus on a couple of things and that's it, and, just kind of cut loose and play, I think he could really help you out. But big question, right? It's like, I don't know. It's the whole defense outside of Aiden Hutchinson. Really, you could say that about, to me. I don't know how a lot of these guys are going to perform, because a lot of these guys have been in these situations. Dax Hill, I guess you could say that too. We know that, what he can do from an athletic standpoint, but that's the thing here. A lot of these guys have played before, and, we've seen sort of the mistakes, and we've seen some of the issues, and we've questioned some of the things we've questioned. And it's like, I don't know, is all that going to change? I don't know. And there's a lot of guys like a Donovan Jeter that you're waiting on. It just seemed like last year that was the whole defense. It was just a bunch of guys that they'd spent many years waiting on, and we're still waiting. So, I guess we'll kind of see. you can change anything you want. You can change the front. You can move people around. Like, at the end of the day, Mike, it's still personnel. You're right. I mean, the recruiting had fallen off. It needs to be restocked. And that, to the point at the beginning of the show, that's a result that you're not going to see much from immediately, and that's going to take a minute. So, yeah, I mean, that's what complicates this whole thing, really, is the defense. Just no one has any expectation that they're going to be good defensively. Maybe they'll be passable. Maybe they'll surprise us. But, I mean, the bad part of that, if it goes the other way, could be really, really bad, and everybody knows that. So that really is what paints this whole season and kind of clouds it as you look at it right now is, are they going to be able to surprise us? Because if they're not, then the offense is going to have to be perfect, and that's kind of what they're looking at here.
What sort of scares me, Nick, is when I look at the defense, the secondary, to me, is maybe the strength of the defense, but the last time we saw those corners in the COVID season, and I still don't know what to take from the abbreviated COVID season, but our corners got torched, all 6 games.
Right.
So I know there are battles there. Some positions not decided, but wow, does that have to get fixed too?
Right, and that's one where really it comes back to, I think, it's as much about teaching those guys how to play zone coverage and being good in zone coverage and being comfortable and confident in zone coverage as it is everything else. Just basics of, because when last year started as bad as it did, they tried to move into some zone principles and it was worse because they just didn't know. They were like less comfortable with that, right?
Yeah.
So that was really when you looked at it and were like, oh God, this really all needs to change, and they really have to not only change where they're going, but also sort of change how they look at their roster. And so asking guys to do things that they're not capable of doing or not ready to do can't be a thing. You got to teach guys kind of to have enough tools in the toolbox to kind of get through all that. So for me, that's what this year has been about, I would say, for Mike Macdonald. You're trying to teach the secondary, a lot of guys that are talented, like we've said. I mean, guys that can play. We've seen Vince Gray make plays before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he's, guys that can play if their confidence is there, but you've got to be able to get them, to start walking and chewing gum at the same time again and remembering why they're there, like remembering what got you here. And I think that's a big, big step for the secondary. And that secondary could probably be the one where if you're looking for somebody to surprise you, it would probably be them, right? It would be, there is talent back there. There are guys that can run. There are guys that can play. There were highly recruited players back there. So if anybody on this defense is going to, turn ahead, I would think it would be them, but they also maybe have the furthest to go. So it's kind of which one is going to kind of win out there. I don't know, but it's certainly fascinating.
You mentioned, or we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the offense that we're going to know a lot about them after that first game against Western Michigan. Flip it over to that defense. According to what we know about Western Michigan is they have a high octane offense. Yeah, it's a MAC offense, but it is going to be a good test for Mike Macdonald's new D, isn't it?
Yeah, Tim Lester's been there now for a couple years. I mean, he's got a system in, like they're ready to go. That was one where you could see the transition they had, post PJ Fleck was unique because, Fleck was unique and everything he did there, but also, Western continued to, recruit at a decent level in the MAC, has continued to sort of not the same probably that Fleck had, but still getting pretty good players to come through there. And more importantly, the offense, Lester's offense has been there now for a minute. So that is more than anything, probably the test that you're looking for Michigan in week 1 is defensively, you're not going to be able to just go out there and be so much better athletically that the other team is just going to fall apart, make mistakes, and give you a game. I wouldn't think that'll be the case here because I think this will be an offense that's established within a program, regardless of sort of personnel. They'll know what they're doing. You're going to have to really, put where you're at with your new schemes, where you're at with confidence, put all that to the test and see if you can play, mistake-free football. If you do that, you'll be fine. But that's the thing that everybody gets tripped up with in a game like this is if the defense goes out there and starts tripping over itself and just offering layups, Western's good enough to take layups, right? So I think that's where you look at this one at and say, if you're just going to do that, then all of a sudden this is one that you could really quickly be in kind of a hornet's nest if you're not careful. And everybody kind of looks at this one and sees that, right? So, this will be an interesting early test. You kind of like how the schedule plays out, I guess, because we don't have to wait around. You don't have to wait around and see because it's like, we'll we will know. Maybe you don't like it, Mike. Maybe people like me like it, and fans like you guys sit there and chew your nails in the stands don't. But I get it either way. But yeah, we're not going to have to wait very long, I don't think, to see kind of where they're at.
No, first 2 weeks we're going to know a lot, but the schedule, it's just a tough Big Ten schedule. Wisconsin on the road, oh boy. Nothing good has happened at Madison in a long time. Right. Or in Happy Valley, Penn State. Michigan State, big rivalry game on the road. Indiana, Northwestern, and Ohio State at home. So very tough schedule. And, I've been reading as many of the preseason magazines and websites as I can, like most of us. And the prognosticators seem to have Michigan finishing at about a 7-5 record. That seems to be the average. Maybe 8 wins if they get strong quarterback players, surprising play. And, I guess that seems fair. But, man, is there a big segment of the fan base that will say, in year 7 of the Harbaugh era, 7 wins is just not acceptable.
Right.
And that, I can understand that too, but looking at it realistically, a 7 or 8 win season does seem to be pretty good for this team, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, that seems like about as high, if they won 8 games based on where they were a year ago, that seems like it would be a pretty good turnaround. But like at the same time, you'd be facing the same question, like you said, Mike, that you've had for a couple of years. Like, what are we talking about here? 8-4 in year 7 is suddenly enough? Like, I mean, what? So like, yeah, I mean, like I wrote this today. I said that's why they pay Ward Manuel 7 figures, because somebody's got to make that decision. And I do think, though, I really do. I think that this is going to be something that we will know what progress is being made and what progress isn't being made. And I don't think we're going to need, like, you got to get to 9 wins, or you got to beat this team, or you got to do that to know that. You know what I mean? Like, I think you'll know if they're closer to what they should be, or to where they should be in terms of discipline, in terms of togetherness, in terms of playing up to their talent level every single week. You'll know if they're closer to where they should be under Jim Harbaugh or not. And if they're not, then he needs to go and they need to start over. I mean, that's it. Like we talked at the beginning, like you could have argued that last year, and they opted to change everything around him and sort of reset it for less money and everything else. But like, if it's more of the same in any way, if you end the year and you're still asking similar questions, then you are literally just doing the same thing over and over again. Right. So that is, I think, where this is at now. If same to me is as bad as worse, if it's the same, then you're worse. So like you're asking Jim Harbaugh to do a lot in 1 year because not enough was done in the previous 6. That's how I look at it. I don't know if that's necessarily how Ward looks at it all the way, but I don't think that Ward Manuel is entering this season, and I don't think Michigan's administration is entering this season just thinking that, well, we just re-signed Harbaugh, so we don't have to think about this again for another 5 years. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that everyone knows that Jim Harbaugh has to be better and has to prove to everyone that he's doing the things and capable of doing the things that are required to be better, right? So that's how I look at it. But, Mike, I mean, I can't tell you any different than anybody else. I mean, if they're 8-4 with the same losses to the same teams, and a couple of them are close and a couple of them aren't, you'd have my answer. It's time to change. I don't know if it's going to be the same as someone else's. And, that's kind of where it's at, more or less.
You're right about that. I mean, it is a huge year, and is progress enough when you lose to the same 4 teams? That is exactly it. Even if you're more competitive, it's time to start winning some of those games. So, and the fan base is there. I mean, the emails that I get all spring and summer so far, every time I say 7-5 or 8-4, people just go off the hook. There's it's
well, yeah, and I would add this, Mike, too. I would say this before we get out here, but Michigan fans will let you know. So Ward Manuel, we talked about, it's a really difficult decision. We've talked about that before in years with athletic directors here. The fans always let them know. They'll stop showing up. If they stop showing up, it's over. There's a lot of this that we look at in August and say, boy, there's a lot of mystery to it, which is true. But I think we also need to remind ourselves that these things tend to take care of themselves one way or the other. So I think that we'll know. I think that there'll be a definitive kind of, I don't know if it's going to be a great mystery, I guess, is sort of where I'm at with this one, because you sort of did that last year, It was like, well, we'll see, and then they made their decision. If you did that again, it'd be like, well, what are you doing? We'll see how it goes. Yep. But definitely interesting. Yeah.
I am right there too. Final question for you, Nick. Do you see anyone in the Big Ten that will have a prayer or a chance of slowing down that juggernaut in Columbus this year?
The only team I see right now best poised to stop Ohio State would be some team in the NFL. If someone comes and hires Ryan Day, that would be a pretty good way to stop Ohio State. But I don't know if it would slow them down completely. Yeah, I mean, right now, it's not even close. I mean, it's that was something that got lost, I think, in the COVID year to a degree, because the season was so shortened and everything was whatever. But this has been brewing now, obviously, as we know, for a minute. And when 2019 ended, it wasn't even close. They were so far ahead of everyone in this league, and that has only continued. And I don't think that this league has seen anything like this. And I don't know what, maybe 50 years ago, but I mean, this is just a complete stranglehold. Penn State and Michigan recruit at a good level nationally, what everybody would consider a good level, but it's not considered passing compared to what Ohio State's doing, right? I mean, that's the difference, because they're so far ahead of everyone else. I don't know. You look at how college football and everything is changing right now. People talk about NIL and all of that. I mean, NIL is going to help the teams that are already doing well do better.
Yeah.
So I would think that would help Michigan, but I would also think that's going to help Ohio State. So, yeah, I mean, they're in a really good situation. The only way that thing gets screwed up is if they screw it up. I mean, that's how I see it right now. It's a tall task to get up there. But to Harbaugh's point, it's like, what are you supposed to do? Just not try, right? I mean, you got to give it a shot. But you also have to acknowledge where you are, right? I think that's a big part of it. That's something that Michigan was missing in recent years. Acknowledging where you're at. They're in a different stratosphere here. It's not the same. And I think more Michigan fans are certainly able to do that today. But like, this was true 3-4 years ago, and people weren't willing to admit it to themselves. Admit it to yourself, move forward the best way you can. I think that people are there now. So when people get to that spot, productive change can happen and productive things can happen. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But everybody's got to go to the drawing board there, because Ohio State's just so far ahead of everybody. It's not even funny.
Oh, amen. Well, we have 3 weeks to speculate on just what Michigan football will be this year, but the truth of the matter is we're not going to know anything until they tee it up in September. Our guest today has been the outstanding writer and columnist from The Athletic, Nick Baumgardner. Always a pleasure to get you on the show, Nick, and we look forward to our next visit once the season gets underway.
Oh, absolutely, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, in the coming weeks, we will keep you updated on any news out of camp, especially injury reports. Next week, we'll return with another of our beat writers as we continue to preview the fast-approaching season opener with Western Michigan. So make sure you join us again next week. A reminder that you can download our free show app from the Google and iTunes stores, or listen on Odyssey, Spreaker, iHeart, TuneIn, and that's just to name a few. So that will do it for another show. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!